Hey, welcome to CIME. I'm your host, Rashawn Warren, and today we have another guest. But today's guest is we're going to talk a little bit about military service. We're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about his story. We're going to talk about the challenges of being a leader and just getting out there on your own when it's time. Right now, we're going to welcome in TJ Trent. Come on in.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rashawn. I appreciate it.
Well, so how are you doing? But let's start off with you introducing yourself to the people in the land.
Okay, well, I'm TJ Trent. I was a sergeant major in the Army. I was in for about 25 years. I started out in IT, so I was always 25 series, but I got into the cyber stuff later on, and now I'm transition. I'm running my own business, consulting, coaching, executive coaching, and just trying to give back to the community.
Oh yeah, that's super awesome. The military service that we both share. It's always big time. We're always doing a lot. We're always in a high paced environment. We're always reacting on our feet. So as we begin to transition, sometimes like I'm in the mode where I'm just starting to transition, but you in extra transition mode right now. So tell me, how has it been thus far since you started the process?
Well, I was fortunate um, to I was fortunate to have a great boss who allowed me uh, we had a lot of extra time, and I think it was good. I started this process back around Christmas of last year, right as we went on block leave, and it was a gradual effect. And I think that's a graded effect, I guess, maybe, or a glide slope, as you would call it. It didn't just start by leaving the office. It started around September as I kind of gradually removed myself from things, made sure that there were people in place to take my place. And then even once I wasn't around every day, it was continually gradually hand off until probably about January or February, when they were in full stride without me. And it's been, you need every minute of it, every minute that you can get. And not everybody's going to have the opportunity that I had. Everybody's going to have the opportunity that you had, but you need every second of it that you can get, because it's the mental piece, especially when you've been in 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 years. There's, some adjustment.
So you said you've been in for almost 30 years, man. That is super long, man. That's almost older than me, almost.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because that's what I tell people. The individuals and the organizations that I work for, what I tell them is I enable individual and organizations to thrive, to create unbelievable, unimaginable, sustainable thriving. And so uh, I did that, you know, by being part of one of the greatest psychological experiments that's been ongoing since 1776. Somebody's in the comments is probably going to say I got it wrong, but they get my point. Since the creation of the Army, uh, we've been we've been training people to literally be all they can be, right? To and uh, so I've uh, that has just built, right? It just built on it's just built and created opportunity on top of opportunity. And what I mean by that is how many people will go into retirement and be able to make six figures and not, I mean, just in retirement before they even do anything, before they even get up. So, so that's part of it, right? I had goals. I saw that I had a strategy, and then at a more tactical level, I had that strategy gave me a framework for making decisions. The more tactical level decisions, and I was able to take advantage of opportunity. And I will say this: the higher up you go, the rarer the opportunities are. And I'll give an example. When I was selected for SAR Major, when I was selected to go to the SAR Majors Academy, because I was one of the classes that they changed the rules, and so I was selected to go to SAR Majors Academy. In my MOS, there's only 7 SAR Majors, and there were maybe 2 open positions. Again, so it wasn't one and done. It was never. I couldn't quit. I had to run through the finish line, and I always tell Claudia Twist. I said she gave me the best Christmas present ever. Like I said, right before we graduated, a few months, she decided to retire, and then and so then that kind of sealed my fate. There was also lots of political changes, going on, reductions in the overall force, and all those things affect the number of SAR majors or general officers you can have on hand. So the Army gave me a basis where I was able to build a foundation that will last me for the rest of my life, and allows me to thrive. It not only created the attitude and the mindset, but it literally gave me the resources.
I think about the military and all the things I've learned since I've been here. One, kind of like you're saying, as far as thriving is concerned, I have a skill set that I could take out into the force with me that's ready to go. Been leading in high paced places for a long time, been managing people after people after people. The institutional environment has been awesome to me because it has taught me so much. Maybe some of the stuff I didn't want to get, but I got it now. So I'm like, all right, now I can utilize it. And I can see that you're taking advantage of all that. Also, I was reading up a little bit about you, and you had this thing you were talking about. Heroism is misunderstood.
Oh, the heroism fallacy. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you mean? What did you mean by that?
Well, what do you think when just? I'm gonna answer your question, but I'm gonna ask you a question. So when I tell you to name a hero, name somebody for me.
My mom.
Okay. Is there a particular event associated with that thought, or with her?
It's a story of her, and I'll share it real quick. I share it with a lot of people. My mom was a single parent. She was like 15. I watched her. She raised 5 kids by herself. I just watched her do it. She's like not a high school graduate. She doesn't have any fancy education. She had hard knock life experience, right? And I grew up as the oldest, just watching her go through all these hard times, and it became who I am today because I watched someone endure and overcome consistently. And to some people, they would say, "Oh, that's not success in life," But I think it's success in life because I was able to take whatever she went through and just feel like, you know what, I can make it too.
Yeah. And so that's what you just explained is the embodiment of what I mean by the heroism fallacy, right? It's it's not a moment in time that makes the hero, and hero stands for hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. It's based upon something I wrote about in Star Majors Academy called psychological capital. Those things are forged over time. Your mom may have been or a lot of times people we think of as heroes, Medal of Honor recipients, stuff like that. What allowed them to act in those periods of extreme duress or to be recognized as a hero wasn't that one time what is essentially an act of desperation. It was all the things they had done before that. It was the decision to persevere. It was the decision to not give up. I'll give a personal story of myself. When I was in basic training, Fort Jackson, South Carolina, back in 2002, I had to think for a minute. But we're doing Nick at Night. It's the last deal before we graduate, and the bunker alarm goes off, and you're supposed to crawl into the bunker, and then they're shooting the 50 cals way over your head. But they tell you if you breathe wrong, your head's going to explode in a pink mist. And so I didn't go. I was stunned. And Drill Sergeant Kelsey Goodson picked me up and threw me over, and I just started crawling. And that's that's where the heroes like your mom are made. They just continue. They just keep crawling, and it hasn't been easy for me, for you. And as you get more senior, there's more factors come into play, and your ability to serve can be impacted by a lot of things other than your potential or your performance. And so the heroism fallacy is that it's just what I said earlier. It's not the things that happen in that moment of desperation or extreme duress. It's what's happened before that. It's all the things that we do to put ourselves in a place to succeed when in the most disruptive and volatile situations.
Yeah, because we do go through a lot, and some of the things that I'll put it like this. So I think we have been conditioned. We experience all this high speed stuff, like you're saying. You're going through Nick and Night, where you crawl in under the barbed wire, they're shooting the 50 cals, everything lit up, and you get the little peak up there. You're like, man, it's hot out there, but you keep going, but you still have that sense of fear because, like you said, hey, this can happen to you. But I mean, I think that's a good comparison to life. You know, all of us are going through a bunch of stuff. You know what I'm saying? You could come up in a bad socioeconomic position. You can come up in a single parent home. You can come up in a home where domestic violence is prevalent, right? Or you cannot be eaten because you just don't have enough for a bunch of people. But you still are keeping your eye on the prize of what could be if you just don't stop. You're still thinking like, man, maybe if I just keep, as you said, crawling, one day I can be that. But for us as senior leaders, the consistency matters a lot because I mean, you don't get to be a sergeant major just because you got lucky. You know what I mean? It doesn't happen like that. That means you went through a bunch of different things, and I can attest. You just as you get more senior, you doing more bobbing and weaving, you hooking and jabbing, and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, but no matter what happened, you got to keep going. But the leadership part is the key. And I want to touch base with you about leadership real quick. So leadership has probably been somewhat consistent throughout, maybe not the same level of leadership, but you've always had leadership. At what point in your career did like your definition of leadership change? Like you thought it was super awesome, and then you were like, "Man, this thing ain't what I thought it was."
Well, I'll never forget. It's ingrained in my mind. The FM says leadership is providing purpose, motivation, direction while operating to accomplish the mission. And I'm going to tell you, I'm a reductionist. I am at heart. I won't say I'm a lazy person, but I want to do the most while conserving the most effort. If that, you see what I'm saying, I want to maneuver on the battlefield, in the most efficient way possible. And so, I think that's what leadership is. It's heart. It's understanding the mission, or another way to say it is our reason for existence, and helping uh, and helping the organization and the individuals succeed. But I mentioned the organization first because uh, the organization is our is a source of great resource for us in terms of pay, and it has to make a profit, whether that's uh, in the army, uh, or it's in the civilian world. So uh, it's about that's where the good leaders, you know what skill sets are in the organization, and we try to align them. But ultimately, leadership is about guiding people, to success. And I think it's gotten simpler for me over the years, not more complicated.
When I was in OCS, they would say, "Follow me," and then we say, "Lead the way." We had all these things that we would repeat. I keep in my mind when I think about leadership. I will always place the mission first. I would never accept defeat. I would never quit. I would never leave a fallen comrade. We all have all of these creeds, the ethos that we embody, and then we just build upon those. I was just talking to somebody the other day, about the different domains that we operate in within the Army, but they're also in the civilian world too. When talking about the institutional, the operational, and self development, right? When I think about leadership, you come into the Army, you get to start getting the institutional stuff. They're like, "Hey, we need you to go to basic training, man, and kind of learn how this thing goes," right? And then once you get to basic training, you know a little bit. They send you to an AIT, you learn some more. That advanced intermediate training, and then they're like, "You know what? You're ready. We're gonna put you in the operational domain. Now you're in the operational domain. You hooking and jiving. You running through. You're doing your job. You deployed somewhere, and then you can stop there because the hardest domain, I believe, is self development, because that's what starts to separate people who have mastered those other two. Because you gotta say, you know what? Maybe I need to read this book on my own. I've been watching that leader, and he's not super squared away, but that dude right there looks sharp. Let me try to get some mentorship. That's self development again. But it kind of, for me, it ties into the psychology of things, right? So as I understand it, you have a doctorate in psychology. Is that good, bad, indifferent?
Well, it's clinical psychology, and I'm about I haven't I'm conducting my clinical rotation, so I haven't officially graduated, but it's but yeah, that's correct. And that was another one of my passions, and why I decided. People say, "Wow, that's crazy." You were in cyber, signal, and then you did cyber, and now you're. And in my mind, it all comes out in the wash, because everything has to do with what's going on up here.
So with that in mind, tough question, tough question. You know, what do you think is the biggest lie about leadership?
Oh man, it's the the I think that today that you're going to always like your leaders, and I think you have to go back and look at what the word like means. I mean, there's many ways that you and I aren't alike. I mean, from skin color to uh, to many different things, and you got to go back. And so we're not going to we're not going to be alike. We're not going to like everybody that we work for, but I believe we can still have respect, and we can still get the job done. And I think the other lie is that a lie, or maybe misconception, is that you're just there to take care of the soldiers, or to take care of the. And what is taking care of soldiers? those are, you can't do, you need, both. You need the organization, and you need the people to be, uh, within the organization to help. But at the end of the day, we have a job to get done. We have goals that we have to meet. We have objectives that we have to achieve, and it's very challenging. And the more you go, it's not for the it's not for the faint of heart. There's going to be days, as you know, when you get especially at the commander levels, where you know you're not going to make anybody happy. You're not going to. A great example right now is these changes to what is it, 600-9, and they want record, from what I understand, record assessments during the 180-day assessment period, and they want you to flag people that don't meet the standard. And you have to. It doesn't matter what you or I think. We have to execute, right? There's ways that we can. We always find ways to mitigate things, especially for people that are high performing and adding a lot to the organization. But the misnomer that you're only there for the to support the individuals is gravely mistaken. The more senior you get, you have to, every decision that the sergeant major, colonel levels are organizational decisions.
Yeah, you're right. You when you said always take care of soldiers, like, is one of the misconceptions I Eli. I think I fell victim to that. I mean, I say I fell victim because that's all I heard whenever I came in. Hey, take her to soldiers, you'll be all right. Take her to soldiers, you'll be all right. So I was tunnel vision. I'm like, take her to soldiers. Always place me first. Take her to soldiers. And you know who I didn't take care of? Myself. I was hurt, and I kept pushing. Then mentally, I was hurting. I kept pushing until eventually, I had to go get medicine. I had to see counselors. I had to see therapists. And you know what I do? I wake up in the morning and I go take care of soldiers. And I never tell anyone that, hey, I got an issue, because I didn't think anyone cared. I thought that as long as I'm taking care of soldiers, I'm staying fit. I was G to G. I was good to go until I ultimately broke down physically, like elbow, knee, back, neck. I'm getting shots here, I'm getting shots there, nerves burnt here. And then I realized I could have avoided all of this if I would have taken care of myself.
I would, kind of in the same boat. I think it's why we have, historically, veterans have that first 12 months is the kill zone, so to speak, after you retire. And the self-harm and the suicidality and stuff is so high because we're used to putting the mission first. The funny thing is nobody ever told me to neglect myself. Somewhere when we somewhere we lost a little bit of our orientation, I guess, so to speak. And we just we just kept pushing through the kill zone. And you don't take care of yourself. You don't take care of yourself like you should. I'll tell you, there were many a days as a sergeant major that I thought, I had 10 calls about, this, about what's going on with soldiers, and are you working on, are they working too hard? Are they not? I was like, what? But no, not one of those times did anybody ask about, the colonel or myself. And it's okay because we're big boys. We're big boys and girls. We figured out a way to take care of ourselves. But I didn't realize that I was probably struggling with PTSD until Colonel Dwayne Wagner said, hey, give me a call one day. He said, hey, you're not going to agree with me, but I think you're showing some signs of PTSD, and it might be helpful for you to get checked out. And then that was a game changer that allowed me to thrive even more.
I had something similar. So when I was in Mosul, Iraq, a convoy got blew up. Every since while I was deployed, it wasn't really a thing because I think it's like kind of what I expected. I'm on the ground, I'm doing missions, I'm running around all the time. Definitely not doing any air defense stuff. I'm ripping and running on the ground with the troops, right? And but when I got home, I noticed I was different. I noticed I was different, man. And but every time I would drive and I would see something in the road, I was like dodging that thing like Mario Kart, man. And it became such an issue that I like eventually I had to like just go in and just be like, man, I'm having these problems. And but then I was like, I don't want to do nothing formal because I don't want nobody to know that like I'm like that. But it goes back to what you were saying about, you're like, "Oh, no one told me not to take care of myself, but I would challenge that. I would say they did, because the reason that I did not go get help is because I was what I heard other leaders say about people who were trying to get help. When I was a youngster, they were shooting people down left and right. So even though I needed help and I needed to talk to somebody, I heard the senior leaders talking about it. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to get help. I'm gonna have to fix it myself. And there were, I have not what you probably haven't heard this about me, but there was many times where I was like right here to not even being here anymore. Like I was there, and probably something happened, or I went to sleep and woke up and like, all right, I can do another day. But it was only because what I heard seniors or ahead of me say, and out for fear, like, man, if they think that about me, I might not get promoted. I might not make make it to retirement. And so I just held it in and kept it moving.
And so I'll say this: my experience was I've had I've had probably the most amazing experience that one can have in the Army. I didn't have those challenges, but I'm certainly aware of them. I certainly understand that they exist. My research for my dissertation is on how the Army culture uh, influences uh, people's perceptions of soldiers, perceptions of mental health and mental health and getting help, and how it impacts their sense of belongingness, or their sense of uh, uh, belongingness. Those are key. Belongingness is one of the key constructs that we know in terms of what affects somebody's desire to harm themselves. So there's three factors. That's one of them. The other two have slipped my mind for some reason, even though every day I'm looking at them because that's what my research is on. But so I'm looking forward to seeing to doing the interviews and seeing how that comes out, because I I don't know why it's like that. I can tell you that I did a paper in the Sergeant Major's Academy that won the Military History Award, and it was about, everybody else was writing about battles, and I wanted to write about. I wrote about mental health. And one of the things that I talked about was, or I recounted, was General Patton slapping those soldiers, and during World War II. And I'm not trying to give anybody a buy, but as Donald Rumsfeld said, not a very popular person, but he says, there's different kinds of unknowns. There's known unknowns, and then there's the unknown unknowns. And for many years, even less so today, but mental health was one of those unknown unknowns. What do you in World War One, soldiers that had what was then called shell shock were totally incapacitated. In World War II, what we saw was probably what we would term today PTSD, right? And so you're still functional, but at a very, but it's, to varying degrees, and especially when you're triggered and you're having those acute panic and anxiety or fear-based symptoms, right? So I I recognize uh, that some of our culture probably negatively impacts it's. So I remember just now. So our belongingness, our whether or not we believe we're a burden, right? So toward belongingness, perceived burdensomeness, it definitely well, we'll see. I think it impacts it, right? And the 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 over under on how much, or we'll find out when we do the interviews. I'm looking forward to it. But the other thing I'll tell you, and this as a commander, and I know this is Sergeant Major, is if you're in the, are you, because you're air defense, right? You're not field artillery, you're air defense.
Air defense, ADA, if it flies, it dies.
Okay, yeah. Because I served with 32nd. One of the best colonels I ever worked for was air defense. But I was forward with them at the forward headquarters in Qatar, with 32nd, and what I will say is that there was somebody there that needed help. They were a senior officer. You could see the signs, right? And it was starting to, perhaps impact not the mission, but the interactions with the staff. And I remember the discussions about options. Well, do we file a formal complaint? Do we do it this way? And I was like, no, because that's not going to get them the help that they need. And so that's my, what I was getting to is that sometimes our mental health or seeking help, depending on our job. I mean, if you're the pusher, I know that all that stuff is automated, but if you're the guy in the shelter, that pushes the button, when there's an air breathing threat, and that requires multiple levels of approval, but you're the one that ultimately pushes the button, and you're telling people on social media, hey, I think I'm so messed up that I might push that button tonight, and it's probably going to impact your career until we figure out what's going on, right? I mean, you're not going to be able to work, may restrict your access, your clearance. Those are realities in the Army because they affect readiness, right? But it doesn't mean that we still can't be helpful and empathetic and be there for people.
I think because usually, as you mentioned earlier about clinical psychology, from the neurological perspective, um, you know, what do you think happens when, like, the leaders we talked about, they remain in that survival mode for too long?
Oh man, well, I can answer that one firsthand. You know, and I will say this, and maybe this is probably the one. I wouldn't call it a negative experience, but maybe it was probably the worst experience I had as a battalion sergeant major. And nobody. I look back now, and I should have not went to Kuwait. Somebody should have said, no, you need to not take this assignment. 9 deployments over the course of 25 years. I had just been deployed with 32nd in 2021. Came back to go to Sergeant Major's Academy, and then the the option was Kuwait or retire. It's SMA is very clear. You're going to go where we tell you, or as a sergeant major, you're going to retire. And I took that seriously. Not everyone does. People are fallible. We work the system, but nobody got over there. And I look back, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. I mean, you can only keep it together for so long. At some point, it's gonna, the plane has to land, or it doesn't have to land, but it's gonna come down. It's gonna come down sometime. You may be able to keep it going. You may be able to get them in air, refueling for a while. Yeah, you're gonna keep it going. That after a while, you get to a point where the smallest things irritate you.
Man, I think so. I guess you could be mentally tough, but psychologically unhealthy at the same time.
Oh yeah, I mean it's the same as the skinny fat people, or the fat skinny people. I mean, there's big people that are healthy, like yourself, and there's skinny people who smoke 12 packs of cigarettes, before lunch, and eat 20 packs of 20 Snickers, and they look okay, but they're really not.
That's a good example. That's a super good example. I have another question for you. So I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it. This pertains to executive coaching. You talked about that earlier. Did As you move into the executive coaching realm, did you kind of feel, you know, guilty as you started to slow down? Finally, like, this train is coming down. I'm going to go ahead and do this executive coach thing. And when you go to do executive coaching, do you feel like the people that you're helping, they're like slowing down too, trying to figure it out?
That I feel guilty. I don't. I honestly, don't think I did. When I walked out of the headquarters, the core headquarters, for what was probably one of the final times. I might have to go back once more. I think I had left it all on the, I left it all on the battlefield. I had no regrets. I went full throttle the entire time. So no, I didn't. And even in my as on my trajectory to get out of the army, I've still intervened and gotten involved in stuff that needed my attention, like compassionate reassignments or something, because I knew that no matter how good the person was that was replacing me, and he's great, he's number one on the promotion list to sergeant major, now just found that out, but I knew that saying you're working in this position and having the rank and the relationships, and the HRC commander being your old battalion commander, that sometimes you just gotta you gotta use those resources that you built over those years, and that's why I didn't regret it, because I would have called up the chief of staff of the army if I thought it was necessary, and would have gladly used that influence that I've acquired to be able to do so. I very adamant about the fact that when you get to the sergeant major level, not so much, and like I would tell my battalion commanders, I was like, hey, you guys are trying to get, you're hoping to get promoted one more time. I said, this is the end of the road for me. So, let me, let me use me appropriately, and let me stand in the breach sometimes, because I can absorb more of the black. And I did that. And I was happy to do it. And I was happy to speak, candidly and not, but appropriately. And so I felt like when I left, I didn't have any regrets. I had done everything that I could. Um, the executive coaching realm, I think when you look at high performers, and I'll say this: for anybody that's in the Army, to on a sliding scale is a high performer. And what we don't realize is that the Army artificially makes things hyper competitive for a reason, because it wants the difference. I'll just share a social example. The difference between like the world record holder in the 100-meter dash, or whatever we're calling it today, and the second place person is like tenths of a second. And that's what it's like in the Army. The difference between number one and number two, and maybe even number 10, is tenths of a second, not minutes, not hours. And I think it's like that. When you're coaching executives, very high performers, they're people that very very goal oriented. But what they need, and as we can attest to, is we need not to breathe our own exhaust. We need somebody who's willing to tell the colonel that his beret's on backwards, and that you shouldn't be wearing white socks to PT, even though it's allowed. I'm just joking. But we they need people that like we so often, like all of us do, that have a perspective. And that's the thing. I read somewhere at one time that if you're charging the hill, with your unit, you're part of the battle. You're not commanding it. And so that's why we always talk about getting to the high ground. And we talk about, because we want to get to the point that offers us the most perspective. And that's what we do, coaching executives, coaching other high performers, is we help them get to the high ground. We offer them, the high ground on demand, so to speak, because we're external. We're not vested in, the internal dynamics of the organization.
So I guess for since we're talking about high performers, right? Do you think burnout is inevitable for those guys and gals?
Oh, is it inevitable?
Yeah, I mean, I say that because as a high performer, I believe I'm a high performer. I'm like pushing and pushing. I'm pushing. I'm pushing. I'm pushing. I'm not necessarily looking at everybody, but I'm challenging myself. I've always had this thing like, if my name is on it, it's gonna be good. I'm gonna try my best to make it good. And sometimes, turn some stuff in, or I do some stuff, and they're like, "Hey, you kind of missed the mark on that." But since I believe myself to be a high performer, I'm gonna go make those corrections quick, and then I'm gonna bring them back. But I think if you're operating at this level for so long, eventually you're gonna be like, "Man, I'm just so tired." You know what I mean?
I don't know what the tiredness. So I think burnout's interesting, and as somebody who's been there and done that, and has the scars, or maybe the awards to prove it. The I think when you start getting burned out, when you start getting bored, and you're no longer curious. Now, I'll tell you, clinically, I think burnout could be a sign of PTSD, of some type of trauma or stress related uh, reaction. But just speaking commonly, I think that burnout happens when we're bored, or not engaged in the mission. We got to know that about ourselves. And I think for soldiers, or people that have been in the military, we're kind of like, I have a German Shepherd. German Shepherds are great dogs. And they're goal oriented. They like to work. And then you have the Belgian Malinois that will scale tall buildings, in a single leap. That will that will just do all, who are just hyper, focused. And I think I use that example a lot, is I think that's what, we are. The Army has bred us, or raised us to always run towards the gunfire, whatever that may be, whether that's the red light special at Kmart or it's, literal gunfire. The Army's raised us to do that. And, like sometimes it loses its luster, right? And you're ready to move on to the next battle. I think it's also why sometimes we see people like you and me, it appears that like their favorite hobby is pulling the pin on a frag grenade and throwing it in the living room during the Super Bowl party. We've become also, and I say this on my website, I say, I'm there's no disruption or volatility that I'm not used to. I survived and I even thrived in warfare, right? We both have. And so I think our burnout's going to look a little different at a subclinical level. I mean, like I said, at a clinical level, we're probably talking about PTSD or something else that's going on. But I think maybe we just get bored. I think executives, they get bored. For me, I wanted to be like a lot of my mentors and go past 30 and go, nominative and stuff like that. But then one of them set me down and said, take a look at this, consider some other things. And, I also was like, I had to be real with myself. It's like, I'm kind of bored. There's not, Sergeant Major, regardless of level, does kind of the same things. And I just, for me, and I'm not saying that, but for me, I also knew that I was very prone to getting, bored easily. So it was probably time to do something else. And then I just once I came back home from Kuwait, and I was with my family again and stuff. I knew, and I tell this story. I was talking to General Admiral. He's talking about all this cool stuff we're going to go do. And not out of disrespect, but just in my head, all I heard was like, blah, blah, blah. Normally that stuff would have lit me up like a Christmas tree. I'd have been happier than, I don't know. I'd have been happier than a kid on Christmas, with all the toys he asked for. But I wasn't, it was, I didn't want to go. I didn't love the things I used to love anymore. I didn't want to go to the field anymore. I wasn't interested in, I was always interested, and I never lost my love for being around soldiers. But I wasn't interested in running down, Battalion Avenue, at 5 a.m. anymore. I wasn't. And so it was time to, I literally walked back to the office and submitted my retirement paperwork that day.
All right. So we're getting close to the end, but I got 2 more questions for you real quick.
Yeah, shoot.
What is one leadership belief that you completely change your mind about?
Oh, being your authentic self. And a guy named Jeff Pfeiffer, professor at Stanford, helped me come to that conclusion in his book, Leadership BS. And I'll tell you why. Because you're authentic, it's not necessarily what you need to get through that. Meaning that we could think being our authentic self is to be, quiet and diminutive and not push back. But in certain circumstances, like you want to be the CEO of a startup in Silicon Valley, you're going to have to be willing to be appropriately, combative, willing to push back. You're going to have to be, you're not going to be able to be diminutive. You're going to have to be, as I say, bold and not humble. And so that concept of being my authentic self totally changed.
Okay. I want you to finish this sentence right here, right? If the world would be different, the world would be different if every leader understood what?
You're not there to make everyone happy. If you want to make everyone happy, buy them a puppy.
Yeah, you know what? I like that because I think I kind of always understood that one, not the puppy part, but but like like somebody told I cannot remember who told me something, but they were like who told me this, but they were like, Ray, if they're probably going to be mad even if you made their bed for them, and they're going to tell you that you didn't um, puff the pillow the right way or something. He says, and I started laughing because he was like, everyone has their own thing. Everyone sees the world their own way. And the way you do things, even if you're doing it for the mission, you're doing it for the team, and sometimes you're doing it for them, they're still going to be like, that ain't the way I would have did it.
I'm not there to offer you unconditional love. You know, my if I am a battalion commander, battalion sergeant major, my love is very much conditional on getting the mission done. Not as a human. I mean, and again, we're always supporting the person, right? But that doesn't mean I'm not going to recommend that they chapter you. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to recommend that that you get promoted, or that I am. And that's why I said that, because uh, some of the best leaders, when I think of the Khalid Shabazz, I think of Jeff Cole, who was a air defender, is an air defender, one of the best officers that I ever worked with in 25 years. They were, they said what needed to be said, and they didn't do it disrespectfully. It might not always been delivered the way you want it to make you feel the best, but then I began to understand that only one person can make me feel bad, and that's me, because you may say something totally disrespectful and to me, but it's the meaning that I'm applying to that's going to determine, whether I respond resiliently or I go and cry myself to sleep in the pillow. I mean, um, or maybe I do that for a little bit and then I bounce back. But my point is that uh, we're not here to offer unconditional love.
Yeah, I totally agree because uh, everyone always says I'm mission focused. Um, I guess when I think about how to take that from where I sit, I'm here to do my job. I'm here to do my job, and inherently I'm a good person, I believe. So with doing my job, I'm gonna try to be the best person that I can, and because that's just who I am as an individual. But I'm gonna be Rashawn, but I'm gonna do what the Army needs me to do. Okay, with all that, we're gonna end this thing off. I'm gonna pass it over to you, TJ. What do you got to say to the world to end this thing off?
Well, what I'll say is there's lots. I'll leave them with a question. Do you want to be the disruptor, or do you want to be the one that's disrupted by volatility? Always understand the operational environment so that you can shape it. And if don't take unsolicited advice from random weirdos on social media.
Hey, TJ, thanks for the time today.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you jumping on the cast today, everyone. I'm your host, Rashawn Warren with CIME. That's TJ Trent, and we're out of here. Catch you on the next episode.